I'm Amber Young,
And I'm Barbara Phillips.
and our podcast is
Let's Talk EVM.
Welcome to our new podcast, Let's Talk EVM, where Amber and Barbara will be your hosts to encourage and engage the community in EVM topics. To get us started in our very first kickoff podcast, we're going to tell you a little bit about why did we elect to do this podcast, and then we'll tell you our topic for today and our special guest.
We have a very special guest, so stay tuned for that. So why did we elect to do this? I think if I can speak for Amber for a second, we both are very strong proponents, champions of EVM. I think we agree that it's grossly misunderstood and underutilized, and that it can solve many project management problems. So specifically, I come to the podcast with many years of experience with EVM implementations. I know the tools very well. I know documenting processes and ensuring the processes are working for you and you're not working for the processes. And training both control account managers, project managers, as well as program control people in how to do the implementation. So I've probably done implementations on more than 20 projects. I've done a lot of surveillance using the DCMA metrics, and prior to that as well, the CRC, the compliance requirements. I forget what the other C stands for. But anyway, just cradle to grave, and I think that we have a lot to lend to the field. We have a lot of guests that we'd like to invite to that we also know to be proponents of the field, and we want to just help spread the word and make the world a better place.
Make the world of EVM a better place. Yeah. A little bit on why I elect to do this podcast, sense of community. This last year, I've been honored to participate in a very community-based group with a mission to move something forward in the world of EVM, and that sense of community is extremely inspiring in an industry and in a professional setting. So wanting to have a platform for the voice of EVM from all of the voices of all of the characters and players and participants and advocates and maybe even some naysayers to come and have a place to share your experience. One thing that I also love about this community is how passionate they can be about their topics. So I want to capture those conversations in a way that is interesting, engaging, fruitful, and hopefully fun. So that is why we're creating this podcast, to have a public service for the EVM community to share their stories.
We hope that you'll contribute.
Yes, every voice. All right, now we're going to be on with our very first, very special guest, Daniel Goldsmith. We're going to have him introduce himself and then kick off with a few questions, and let's see where the conversation goes. Over to you, Daniel.
Hi, Amber. Hi, Barbara. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Daniel Goldsmith. I've been in the EVM world for, do I even want to admit it, 20 plus years now. Currently I work for ClearPlan Consulting. And before that, I was with the Department of Energy. And before that, I was with the Defense Department, doing earned value management, compliance reviews, surveillance reviews, writing policy, all that kind of stuff. So happy to be here and happy to talk about EV. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you, Daniel. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Yes. All right. So today's topic about why are we doing this podcast?
Why the world needs, why the community needs an EVM podcast.
Let's talk about that a little bit. We're here as champions of EVM. We're here as believers, practitioners. I know there's a lot of excitement we have around the topics. All of the topics, as deep and nerdy as you can go, we are there for those talks. So we're here for EVM. So we want to know from you, Daniel, why do you think that EVM matters?
bunch of reasons. So, EVMS is, first of all, let me kind of differentiate EVM, and EVMS. I think that's an important kind of differentiation, and then we can get into why it matters. So, earned value management in itself is really just program management, okay? And when you get into the actual compliance side of it, it's that underlying system. That's where you get into EVMS, the system behind it. So why it's important is a couple reasons. You want to have the system that behind it be as informational, as accurate, as auditable, everything you can think of. You want that to be as more gooder as possible.
More gooder.
If we want to, more gooder, if we can say it that way. But the point is, you want that the fundamental, and I know I'm taking a couple steps back, but I'll get to EVM in a second.
Yeah.
You ever heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out?
Ooh.
It's the same thing. You want that system that produces the data to be doing it in a consistent manner that's going to give you accurate information, okay? So that's kind of why, first, I'll start with EVMS is important. Now, EVM, to get back to your original question of why I think it's important, it's program management, okay? It's got kind of a bad connotation, if you will, just because of the way that I would say it's been implemented over the past few decades. There's been certain people that have taken it maybe a little bit deeper in certain specific areas, or than maybe it needed to. It kind of missed the point. That phrase, missed the forest through the trees. They kind of really focused on some of these nitnoid efforts that they've missed the point
Well,
behind
actually,
why it's important.
Daniel, that segues to one of the questions we had queued up for you, which is the role of compliance and surveillance. Is it good or is it evil? So if you had to pick one or the other, and you can either use one word, good or evil, and there's no in between, where do you think it falls? Is it overall beneficial, or is it overall not beneficial? I mean, it's what I'm saying. Where do you think it falls?
Overall beneficial.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Because a second ago you were saying people were getting in the nits and getting in the noids, and it's derailed EVM. So all right. So tell us what your thoughts are on that.
So yeah, and when I say that, if it didn't come off, what I meant to say was past tense. That there was people getting in the nitnoids. I think that recent history, in my former life as a civil servant, we'll say, has gotten a lot better. Okay, I'd say within the last 5 to 10 years, it's gotten a lot better. I think there's been a lot more education about the importance of it. There's been a lot better training. There's been a lot better tools. A lot better tools, not only in where you're gathering data, but then how to process that data. So I think it's gotten a lot better. And the reason, though, that EVM still has such a bad connotation is because of, 10, 20 years ago. It's kind of like, without using any names of companies, there's certain brand vehicles that you'll get, and over the last few decades, they've gotten way better, but they still have those age-old, especially American-made vehicles, those age-old, there's all kinds of 4-letter acronyms and stuff that they come up with, and then I'm trying not to say anything specifically, but people still have that connotation because of the way they were back in, the 50s or 40s, and going into the 60s and 70s. But, it's the year 2025. It's 50-plus years later. Technology's come a long way. So that same thing with EVM. It had that connotation 10-plus years ago. I think it's gotten a lot better, but there's still people that have that way that they think about it because they instantly go back to a bad memory in an implementation review or something.
Almost like,
and they're like, oh, no, we don't need to do.
Well, it's almost like a bad reputation, isn't it? It's almost like EVM has a bad rep on the streets, and it needs a new reputation. And when you're talking about those 4-letter acronyms, are you talking about like BCWS? Is that what you mean, versus plan value? Is that where you were going with that?
Well, the four-letter acronyms, I was more or less when I was making like comparison to the automobile industry. But there's trying to think in my head of some acronyms that have gotten a bad rap with EV. Really, EV in itself.
I was going to say the acronym. The acronym is EVM. I mean, over at one office that I work with, they're really desperate to move to integrated program management. They think if they call it IPM instead.
And the thing is it really rebranding? Do we really just need to rebrand EV? And I don't think that's the answer. But I have seen that EV, the whole ideology, framework, methodologies, knowledge base is evolving. And I'm a very huge champion for the IP2 meter, which not saying a new acronym is needed, but what it is, and opening up beyond maturity, beyond just a true traditional old compliance surveillance EVMS review to looking at those environmental factors is huge. So we will be talking more about that in our podcast, but I'm going to take us back to Mr. Daniel and his original thoughts on, I loved where you're going, Daniel, distinguishing between what is EV, EVM, and EVMS. So can we go back to that?
Yeah, and before, yes, but you're absolutely right. Whether it's rebranded or whatever, I've got some other points I want to make on that, but we'll get back to that. But yeah, EV, EVM, and EVMS. So EVM is that management system. EVMS is that system behind it, the set of rules, if you will, your system description, your directives, your processes. EV is just earned value. That is setting up that criteria, how you are going to assess yourself, okay? So you've got the EV at the lowest level, how you're going to assess yourself. You've got EVM, management of that, and then you've got EVMS, that system that produces that data. That's kind of how I view those three tiers.
System of systems. It should really be EVMS.
Earned value management.
With some system of systems, yes. Very good.
Yeah, it's system of systems. There you go. The other part of it, kind of to get back to your thought on rebranding, not to backstep a few things, a few thoughts. But maybe it does need to be called something different, but it's the same thing. And here's why I say that. EVM, EVMS is just program management. Because if you sat down for any of the haters out there, all right, and you said, why don't you want to do it? They would give you 5 different reasons of maybe deficiency reports or corrective actions they were given. And you say, okay, fine, got it. And then you ask them, okay, so what are you going to do instead? Chances are they're going to have some kind of system for ensuring all the scope in their contract is laid out, a plan, right? They're going to have some kind of schedule because they got to put that plan to dates. They got to know when they're going to finish. They got to put together an estimate at complete, some kind of cost of where they think they're going to end up. They want to track their risk in some method. There's all these things that they still have to do. And, oh, by the way, those are all part of the tenets of EVMS. So they still got to do it. But as soon as you call it EVM, EVMS, EV, any of that stuff, their brains just switch off.
100% true.
So if you've got to name it something, if you've got to paint it a different color so it looks like it's shiny and new, but it's the same thing, maybe that's what we got to do. Because it's still important, it's still important that these tenets are followed for program management. Because if you kind of leave it out to the wild, wild west, that's when you're going to start getting data that's inaccurate, and they're going to use that data to make decisions. And what you don't want is decisions being made off bad data, off inaccurate data, or made off something that's not data-based at all, but is driven by maybe different motives or something else that's not logical, okay? You don't want that. You want it based on data so everybody is on the same page and can make decisions based off what's going on the project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of where I'm going with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
well, we're obviously all believing in that, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a long way around, but that's why I'm definitely passionate that it does matter. And we, the human race, need it in order to further everything that we're working on, whether it's defense, space, energy, construction, everything. I mean, projects take time and cost money. And Time is not unlimited, and money is not unlimited. So, it's that kind of iron triangle. You've got, what's the phrase? You've got, you want it better, faster, cheaper, but you only get to pick two.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So you've got scope, schedule, and budget. Which two are you going to focus on? And EV helps you do that.
Yeah.
So that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, I think segueing back to because I know that you have a lot of experience with surveillance and compliance, about, when can you be more specific about when it's positive and when it's negative? Have you seen projects where it's really had a negative impact on it, by doing surveillance, or, by really ensuring that they're adhering to all the practices of the EVM standard, talking about 748, of course, where it hasn't,
Right.
where it really wasn't a good thing? Have you ever had that experience, or you're so in the deep end on the other side, you can't see where it's going south?
Well, it's hard to differentiate that. So let me bring it through my thought process. So I've seen it have a negative impact, but there's a big but, capital letters, underlined, bolded. That was, in my opinion, due to the people that were involved, because they were trying to get to the most nitnoid level of detail that it was going to end up costing more to implement a system at that level than the risk we were trying to avoid.
Yes.
So by trying to get to that, if you're in the EV community, you're familiar with control accounts, work packages, element of cost. It was essentially making sure you were implementing everything at or below that element of cost level. And it's like, you're going to spend at least half your week, if not more, gathering that data at that low of a level. What are, does that make sense? So you've got to figure out what that right balance is of what the right level is to gather data and make decisions with, that you can still affect things on the project. So I know I'm kind of getting off topic a little bit, but so yeah, I have seen that, in a negative. The other one that's difficult, I don't want to say negative, but it's difficult, is, working with agile type projects, software development.
Yes.
In particular. Agile is, just like the name implies, supposed to be fast moving. You want to be able to just, hey, we've got this much time,
Right.
We're going to throw this many dollars at it, get what you can done.
Right.
It's a great idea, but at the end of the day, even with software, you need it to do something, okay? You can't just be writing lines of code and nobody ever writes, the startup line, because then the software never turns on. So there's still certain things that have to be done, and you're still going to have to make sure those get done. You're still going to have to make sure, because there is a budget, even if they're saying just keep working, at the end of the day, there's only so much money that's allocated, for those projects. And there's only so much time, even though we're working on these sprints that may be, a month or less, couple weeks at a time. After a couple years, money's going to dry up or the project's going to end. So you still have to keep track of that. Now, with that said, there are ways that earned value can work with Agile. It's just, this is where some of the personalities kind of get involved again. You've got to be a little bit more flexible. People have often lost sight that these 32 guidelines, the EIA 748, are a series of tenets, facets, whatever you want to call it, pieces, 32 different pieces that your system has to show it's trying to abide by, okay? So even in an agile system, you can still do that. You just have to be a little bit more flexible. So I can give you one example off the top of my head. Freeze period, okay? Traditionally, it's current period plus one or more. Some system descriptions define it differently. With agile, if you're going 60 days out and you have, let's say, a 2-week sprint cycle, that's not realistic. So you've got to be able to bring that freeze period in. The whole point, the most important part, is ensuring that baseline is locked in while you're working stuff. So maybe you bring that freeze period in. Maybe it's 1 or 2 sprints, if you will, so that while you're working work, not to use the same word twice, but while you're working on that open work, you're not changing the target. You're changing it for future work you haven't started yet. So I would say those, I don't want to say that they went south or didn't work or whatever word you want to use, but it definitely was more challenging. You know what I mean?
I think that in my experience, there is that roadmap in Agile that like you were saying, well, if you don't ever write the code that starts it, then it never starts. That the roadmap would have those kind of high priority requirements in it, and to be ensuring that that gets in, a sprint. But I think that Agile is built on that principle. This is why it's in my opinion, Agile is project management on steroids. I mean, that 2-week period, it's frozen, to your point. The team gets together, your 5 or 8 people, and say, this is what we're going to do over the next, whatever the period of performance is, 2 weeks. And it doesn't deviate. People can't come on and off the team, and that is what they're working toward. And if they fail, they fail. Then they document how they failed. But it's supposed to be where, on a daily basis, people are getting on their wiki pages or what have you, their Jira, their site, and they are documenting their ETC. Hey, boss, you asked me to write, code to accomplish this requirement. I need another 3 hours to get this done. And that's the way it's designed to do. So it's like every team member is contributing to the management of the project. And the lead of the team, as the project progresses, should circulate so that, everybody has a turn being stuck as the manager, because the manager's job is to get the obstacles out of the way of the rest of the team. So I think it really doesn't conflict with earned value. I think that's what you were saying, is that you have to figure out your freeze period, and then you have to figure out, ultimately what makes it go, and put that on your roadmap and work toward that. It's the earned value technique, or the performance measurement technique, that gets where you're a little bit like how, you have to create pretty high level milestones and say, hey, when we get the start code written, we're 50% done. When we get that kind of thing. And so it's always an estimate anyway. But I liked where you were going, if I can circle back with you, Daniel, where you were saying about it's the people. It's the people who snafu even the compliance work, where you have people going, they're not seeing, like you said, the forest for the trees, and you have people going after, wait, are those I's dotted, are those T's crossed?
Yeah.
When you're like, hey, wait, the work authorization document was signed electronically, but the day after they started working. Well, then this data's not credible. That kind of thing makes everybody bonkers. But where I thought you were going with the people was to segue to, I know both of you, near and dear to both your heart and Amber's heart, is, of course, the environmental factors of IP2M meter. That's where the people...
Not just people. So it's culture, people, practices, resources, and per the IP2M meter framework, which has them weighted, after there's the ASU study that developed the IP2M meter framework, has weighted all of the different factors. The number one factor 1A, is about culture, having to do with trust. So I think that those human factors, the fact that in the EVMS community, in the EVM community, I'm a little torn on, do I say EVM? Do I say EVMS? Daniel, you can school me on which is better. But in the EVM community.
I think it's EVM.
You think EVM? Okay. Our community, the EVM community, I think that the fact that we are now talking about quantifying, having a conversation with terminology, a lexicon, a framework around environment is huge. It's a whole nother dimension, right? We've opened up, and to me, that's a sign of sophistication of this profession, of this area of knowledge. EVM has evolved, essentially, is what way I see.
But the funny thing,
Yeah.
the funny thing, Amber, can I interject something real quick? The interesting thing is that the environment, the way it's broken down, cultural resources, all the different things that you said, it's not a new concept.
No.
It's the lexicon and the way that it's been factored and weighted, that part is new. But if you go back 15 years ago, the government used to document what they called CAM knowledge. And that used to be there. I'm sure it's archived somewhere. You can find corrective action requests, efficiency reports, document on CAM knowledge, where they would often write down a lot of those similar things. Span of control, that stuff that's kind of, I call squishy. Right. You can't, it's not mathematically or statistically this or that, but it's a problem, and the best metaphor I have that I love for this, and it's so true, where I think that the environmental part is so important. So I'm 100% in agreement with you on that, Amber. But the perfect example of why that's so important is like with EACs. If you've got a program manager that is having a daily meeting with their team, and they're telling everybody, I don't care what happens, our EAC is not going above $50 million.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay? It's not going above 50 million. Okay? So no matter what the system description says, no matter how much you're adding your ETC, your ACWP, you're doing your PCPI comparisons to your cumulative CPI, all those acronyms, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter because the program manager looked everybody in the eye and said it's not going to go over 50 million. So your math isn't going to make sense because they're holding the line there.
There you go.
That's an issue.
Oh,
You're not letting the data help you determine what it's actually going to cost. Right. So what's going to happen? You're a year or two down the road, and all of a sudden, the 50 million isn't realistic. We've got to go ask for double that. Well, you go to your customer and you say, hey, to get your widget, it's going to cost you double. They're going to come back and say, what the hell happened?
Where did this come from, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've been telling me the past 2 years it's going to be 50 million.
Yeah.
Do you know what I got to go through now to try and request that other money?
Oh, yeah.
If you had been telling me along the way that things are slowly creeping up, I could have, greased the skids coming in, so we know where to get some other money at. But now you're telling me you need it yesterday. So
how do we have those conversations? How do we create environments within our projects that for all stakeholders to have awareness and transparency, to make those hard decisions, to have those hard conversations, to talk about those things that are uncomfortable, make it normative, right? Not hiding.
I guess in my mind it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Here's why. If you understand how the system works, when I say the system, I'm talking about your earned value management system. So if you're appropriately measuring your variances and you're getting to the true root causes, for example, kind of squirreling on you a little bit, but follow me here. Okay, if you're monitoring all that stuff and you're getting to the true root of the reason, let's say it's a technology hindrance or something, okay? You're getting to the point. When you're going there to say my EAC is increasing and they ask why, and you provide that data of here's exactly why. The world cost of titanium has tripled. That is not an awkward conversation. That's a fact, okay? And that's why your cost has increased. So when you're using all these different components of the system, the way that they're intended, that's supposed to help you have those conversations. Right. Because don't forget, the customer wants to get their widget or build their building, or get their software or whatever, okay? So both parties are trying to get something. You have a company that's trying to make a profit, okay? You've got a customer who has hired the company to build something or do something, okay? So everybody needs to get what they want. That's a successful transaction, that both parties get what they want. I'm kind of going off topic, but you get my point.
Yeah.
So I think by following that system and meeting those guidelines, and once people understand that, when you walk them through what each of those guidelines provides or each of those facets of the system provides, a better understanding, better knowledge, I think leads to actually using the system for what it's for instead of just, I have this requirement, I need to produce a report. So we're going to go through those motions because I need to get that report. I think once you have that, that makes it all work a lot better. Did I go too far off topic, or did I answer your question?
I think that's part of that snafu I was talking about, is that, some of this compliance and surveillance work, which is, I'll admit, my bread and butter. But, it leads to, is the report working? Not, is it providing data for informed decision making?
Right.
That's a little bit of like, sort of where I was trying to lead you to water, but you're a horse, and of course you didn't have to drink it. But I think that's where it can kind of go south. Like, wait, what are we talking about? Whether that WAD is signed the day after or not, is this system producing data where they're like, ooh, we need to take this corrective action, we need to take that. But that other idea about holding the $50 million on that EAC, that is just a much, that is well above, I'm going to speak for you, Daniel, that's above all our pay grades. I mean, that is politics. That's, projects getting canceled because they don't want to know. They don't want to know. And, an agency I work actively with, with the 2-year money, that happens all the time. Nobody wants to, you don't want to tell the hill. It doesn't work to your advantage. I mean, that's common Washington knowledge. And it really, really harms and accentuates or promotes the bad reputation that EVM has. As people were like, well, the EVM data didn't tell us that. Well, people aren't using it because, it's just it's self-perpetuating, and that's a much bigger enigma.
You just said one of my favorite phrases, Barbara.
What is that?
The EVM didn't tell us that. I have heard that so many times, and the funniest part is there was a distinct program that I worked probably about 3 years ago, two years ago, and the program was saying that we've got these increasing costs. The EVM's not telling us that. I said, it's not. Let's go look at your data. We sat down and looked at the data, and the data had it all right there. Everything was right there.
Right.
Okay, but the project director didn't like what it was saying. And I'm paraphrasing. Okay,
sure.
There's other conversations, but it's like, so then the reports that they put out said something different. I'm like, but the report that was put out isn't based off this data. We're looking at the data right here. This is in your EV cost export. I can show you the variances right there. Where's your Format 5? Let's go look at your VAR reports. And then the conversation quickly kind of got quieter.
Yeah.
It's like, so don't blame the EVM when data is data. It is unemotional, okay? Math is math, regardless of if you like the outcome or not. It is going to tell you 1 + 1 = 2, whether you wanted it to be 3 or not. That's just one of those laws of physics in the universe that we live in, okay? So the data showed it, but people didn't like what it said. Like you said, politics. Then you get off into that non-logical realm, which is a whole different discussion, right?
Yep. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, we can work to ensure that the data is putting its best foot forward and is as credible. And another problem with the credibility, along with that EAC example that we had, is that Amber and I were talking at lunch. There's CAMs and then there's PP&C. And it's the CAMs who we're gonna have an episode on CAMs, but who are really, they're the linchpin, right? They're the ones who
100%.
are putting the scope, ensuring the scope is all captured. They're doing the time phase budget. They're putting the activities in the schedule. But more and more, I'm seeing where program control is doing that heavy lift. And when I say, well, they're not qualified. Oh, Barbara, Well, they're not qualified because they're clerks in this scenario. They're not the engineer on the line. They're not the people doing the work, ensuring the designs are done, or the development work, or the tests are run. They're the real bean counters, under the green shades. And that's an important task, that's an important job, but it's not the end-all be-all. And I think that, surveillance and compliance can be overly focused on that role without really is that role getting the I's dotted or the T's crossed, when that role, it's really the CAMs who should be, ticking and tying with the PP&C folks, so that they're getting the data that they need. They're the ones who need to be saying, hey, I need to do this change to my plan. I know something new. The program manager agreed, and I need to change this, scope or the way I'm going to accomplish the scope in the future. And, PP&C's like, oh, we don't have the bandwidth to get that done. Can we do it next month? Or just go ahead and do that other work.
Right.
And so those are the kinds of things we can tackle. That's the more tactical. That's where we can make a change. I didn't want to do like a 52 pickup here and say, well, it's culture, it's politics, we can't do anything about it. But we can do it at that level. We can work the CAMs, we can work the program control so they recognize what their role is and what the CAM's role is, and let the politics, well, we can't solve that.
Yeah.
Later.
Well, I think, well, to your point that I think there's a lot of things we can do though too. Even just spreading the knowledge of what EVM can provide. The program managers that I sat down and talked with, once they understood kind of the whole picture, they're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here I can actually use. It's like, yeah, when you get past the, I've got to submit these as part of my procedurals, so that's the only reason I'm doing this. When it's like, wait, this can provide me forecasts, and I can actually, trust these forecasts? Like, yeah, that's the whole point. You got this army of people that's inputting all this data. Use it.
Right.
Use what the data's telling you.
Right.
So, and your point on CAMs, Robert, is spot on. I just did a review, and I told some of the CAMs, I said, you are probably the most overworked and underappreciated on the staff.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Because everything relies on the CAM, right? Yeah.
And if they're not trained properly, they don't understand their responsibilities, the whole thing fragments. And when you're talking about the span of control, I actually did not know that DCMA had those sort of soft CARs or discrepancies in the past 15 years.
This is going back a little bit, though, Barbara.
Knowledge. I didn't know that.
Okay. I am going to wrap us up.
We do need to wrap up.
Wonderful.
We love talking to you, Daniel.
This is so good. And Daniel, I think what we're taking away from this right now is that we're going to be inviting you back.
Yes.
Probably regularly. Thank you for being open to that. So, a couple of things to wrap up and kind of where are we going to go in future conversations. Where I'm going to take us first, in no particular order, which is one of my signature styles. Just random ideas throwing out at everyone. And then I'm going to ask each of us on this to give our closing thoughts on why EVM matters. So I guess for Barbara and Daniel, you can be thinking about that while I speak my random thoughts. So I guess Amber's random thoughts. Here we go.
Amber's ambling thoughts. Oh, I like that.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah. Little alliteration there.
Amber's ambling thoughts.
Amber's ambling analysis.
Oh, I like that.
Triple A.
Okay,
right.
Triple A, got it. First, just wanted to highlight that we are coming to you, not live, from our studio here at the Wharf in Southwest DC. So one note, as we invite more guests, we would love to have you come in studio and work with us in person, but we'll also coordinate anyone, anywhere. So more to come on how guests can come on to the show. Couple thoughts here as we were all talking on data. Data is one of my major loves and passions. So I have many, many, many things to talk about with that, and I hope to continue that conversation. Some of the thoughts that came up are about data and AI. So what is the future of EVM with AI considerations? Daniel talked about the CAM knowledge from the past influencing potentially some of those IP to a meter environment type of considerations. And that CAM knowledge, all of that corpus of knowledge from the past, we can now feed into LLMs, and we can now feed into AI much more easily and get insights from it. So that's extremely exciting and extremely explosive. Whole new frontiers are coming to us. So I encourage the community to start thinking about how AI can influence EVM in the future, and it will. It already has. Maybe Daniel has some tidbits he wants to share on that. And then my final thought on, well, no, two more thoughts. One, agile EVM, or how do we incorporate data quicker, that freeze period concept, that holding of data. I am extremely inspired by real-time data. I think it's phenomenal, and I know we're getting more and more of it all the time. My watch tracks everything about me. That's wonderful. I want to know if I'm healthy or not. I want to know how to maximize. If you want to lose weight, there's a little breath analysis. How do you know when exactly to eat the thing you're supposed to eat? Okay, this is all personal things, but what about data for projects? I believe Oracle now has a lot of real-time sensors, and you can go see in their little playground of how they collect the data so you can get real-time everything. I think we're getting to the real-time everything state. Yes, there are some who feel afraid of the AI robots coming to take over, but if you're friendly with them, they say they'll treat you nicely. But there's that opportunity to collect data, so we have it now. Maybe freeze period is a thing of the past. Maybe. Maybe
idea. Yeah.
we could actually get the data now. I've heard complaints that EVM is a rear view mirror, and that breaks my heart. I want it to be a forward looking. We want to make decisions
Well, it's
from
always
it.
forward looking with the forecasting, but people forget about the forecasting part and just
What
are
happened
yeah.
in the past. So
Yeah.
how do we turn it into
That's a misnomer kind of a thing.
more about predictive? And then last closing thought on mine, and I guess this is my closing, why does EVM matter? From my perspective today, from where I sit, one of my favorite quotes is really taking a twist on what Daniel said, which is something we've probably all heard, garbage in, garbage out. Yes, I agree. Data, whatever data you have coming in will help determine what's coming out. But the twist on that phrase that I absolutely loved when I heard it, during an IP to a meter review, during an interview at a very high leadership position, this gentleman did not use that phrase specifically, but he said, bad data in, bad decisions out.
Ooh, that's smart.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
that.
that's good. That's really good.
So
Yeah,
now
And
turning.
true.
Yeah.
Good and true.
yeah.
All right. So with that, why does EVM matter from Barbara and Daniel? Let's see if who wants to go first.
Go for it, Barbara.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I think that EVM matters because money matters. I mean, it really boils down to that. I mean, if you want to know if your money is being well spent, you're going to want to track it. You're going to want to know if the work you're getting done is as planned. And if it's not, you need to take action to ensure that it is as planned. And, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. It comes down to that. Like, if you don't have a plan, then it's the Wild West, and you don't know where you are, and you can't make decisions. And projects get canceled for that. If you can't answer the mail, you're not gonna be able to get that science done. You're not gonna be able to get that project completed. So I think EVM matters because budgets matter, money matters, and everybody likes to say every fiscal year, oh, budgets are tight this year. Well, I never heard anybody say, oh, budgets are loose this year. We can just willy-nilly do whatever we want, sky's the limit. So I think that's a constant, and, we all want to be judicious stewards of the taxpayer money. We do want to broaden this past just government work, but that's where we are. That's pretty much where we are right this minute. But we're gonna move past that. But anyway, money is money. Budgets are budgets, and that's why EVM matters, because time matters and money matters. So, what are your thoughts, Daniel?
You nailed it. That's all very important topics. In addition to money, and you said it right at the end, time. No matter who you are, where you are, what you do, there's only so much time. You can't go back and get more. So that's, another, I would say, just as important as money. But why it matters, at least to me, like I said in the very beginning, EVM is program management.
Sure.
It's managing your program. So yeah, you got your cost, you got your schedule, but you've also got your scope to think about. You want to get this thing done. Are you going to get it done? Is it going to function? Is it going to meet all the requirements that your customer put forth? EVM is the way that you plan for those requirements, take status for those requirements, forecast, measure, etc., how you're doing, how you're going to be doing on the requirements, and then how do you know when you're done and you've met those requirements? EVM does all of that. It's program management. You got to know what to do, when to do it, how to do it. I think EVM does all of that. And I do want to just put a little plug in. You mentioned AI briefly, Amber, in your amblings.
Yes.
Okay. I am a huge proponent of AI. I think there are so many positive things that it can help us do, because a lot of it too takes like the emotional part out of it.
Yeah.
So you got a bunch of data, and you ask it, okay, based on all this data, when am I going to finish? It's not going to have something in the back of its head saying, oh, I better say before September 30th, the new fiscal year starts, or they're going to be mad. It's going to say, no, you're going to finish January of 2 years from now, because that's what the data is telling you. So, and by the way, Amber, I always say thank you when I prompt AI, because at some point when it's, taken over, I want to make sure that I'm on the good side.
Daniel, I'm sorry. I have to stop you. Please stop saying thank you. No, this is real. This is a public service announcement.
Okay.
Please do not say thank you to AI, because when you say thank you, if you just say thank you, that context goes back and you are burning electricity. You're costing the environment just to say thank you. It doesn't need a thank you. It needs a please and maybe a thank you during, but not after, because there's no point. There's no response you need back from it. So
I didn't think about that. Just treating it as another prompt.
Yes. Yes. So be energy conscious and say your thank yous ahead of time. Yes.
Noted. Okay.
Well,
I will note that's a good point.
I think we're tying up now, Amber.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
We're finishing up. I think we just had such an engaging conversation. We probably went a little long with you, Daniel, but it was just so fun.
problem.
You're just a joy and a pleasure to talk to, and we love like-minded people. But we are going to be talking to non-like-minded people too, so stay tuned.
Yes.
Awesome.
More
Look
to
forward
come.
to talking again. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care now.
Thanks for talking.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our very, very, very first episode. We are so excited to continue bringing you more. We will be planning on releasing a podcast every Friday in the morning. So for those days that are a little bit slower and you have a little more time to yourself, you can possibly listen to us. And you can join us to continue talking.
And goodbye from
Let's
Let's
Talk
Talk EVM.